You weren't supposed to see this. You weren't supposed to know. The green ooze slithered over the tile like it had a life of its own, silent except for the soft, wet slap it made with every pulse. The neighbors screamed, phones out, mouths agape. But her? She froze. Karen Piton, the self-proclaimed queen of Oakdale Heights, HOA president, order keeper, control freak. The clipboard shook in her hands as she watched the suburban crown jewel turn into something ancient, primal, defiant. But this isn't about slime. This is about power and how it poisons everything it touches. You think homeowners associations are just about lawns and paint colors? No. They are miniature governments, unchallenged, unelected, unregulated. Neighborhood monarchies run by the unelected and the unhinged. And in Karen's kingdom, rule breakers weren't corrected. They were crushed. This story, this war, began with a simple act, a man seeking peace in his own backyard, a place to breathe, to be. But peace is the first casualty when control is God. Jake Sullivan didn't just move into a new house. He walked into a battleground of psychological warfare, where every inch of grass was measured, where pool umbrellas had to be beige, where silence wasn't peace, it was surveillance. And the one enforcing it all? A woman with a clipboard and a taste for domination. But what Karen didn't know, what they don't want you to know, is that beneath the HOA's rules lies something deeper, something ancient, something older than property lines or zoning ordinances. It's the system. And Jake, he didn't just fight back. He hacked it, transformed it, weaponized it. What began as passive aggression turned into poetic vengeance, a green tide of rebellion seeping through the cracks of conformity. This is more than a viral neighborhood feud. It's a revelation, because if you listen closely, you'll stall art to see the pattern, control hidden behind standards, coercion masked as compliance. This isn't just Oakdale Heights, it's everywhere. And after today, you'll never look at your own front yard the same way again. The system isn't broken, it's designed this way. And if you're not ready to question everything, you should leave now, because this story only gets darker from here. They smile at you when you move in. Welcome to the neighborhood. But behind that smile, a file already started, a clipboard already marked, a machine already in motion. You see, Karen Piton was never just an HOA president. She was an avatar of a deeper instinct embedded in society, the compulsion to control, to monitor, to punish deviation. And Oakdale Heights was her little empire. Jake thought he was buying a house. But what he really bought was a place in a surveillance grid disguised as a neighborhood. It started small, grass an inch too long, a patio chair out of alignment, pool water 1 shade too vibrant. Each violation was a message. We own you now. That binder Karen handed him, it wasn't just community guidelines. It was a manifesto of dominance, and every line of it whispered the same thing. You don't belong unless you submit. But what Jake didn't realize at first, and what most men never realize, is that these rules are not about community. They're about psychological programming, conditioning, social engineering, a training ground where obedience becomes instinct, where you ask permission to breathe in your own space, where order isn't safety, it's suppression. It's no accident that HOAs exploded in post-war America. When returning veterans tried to build their slice of peace, the system installed watchers, figures like Karen, armed with bylaws instead of batons, but no less brutal. And if you think that's dramatic, ask yourself, why is it always the same type of person in charge? The same forced smile, the same obsession with rules over reason, the same thrill when issuing fines like royal decrees. They are symptoms of something larger, institutional narcissism. A dark agreement between the powerless who crave power and the system that gladly hands it to them in exchange for compliance enforcement. Karen's war wasn't person. It was ritual, a ceremony of humiliation performed to remind Jake and everyone watching who was in control, and when the balloons came floating into his pool like a slow, glittering invasion. It wasn't a prank, it was a warning. But here's the thing, no one told Karen. Some men aren't built to bow. Some men turn slime into strategy. Most people would have cleaned up the mess, scooped out the glitter, replaced the filter, paid the fines, apologized. That's how the system stays alive, by exhausting you until you submit. But Jake didn't clean it, he transformed it. Because deep down, every man holds a spark, a raw, ancient defiance just waiting to ignite. And Karen, in her arrogance, handed him the match. That morning, as he stared at the grotesque carnival of sagging latex and shredded ribbon, clogging his sanctuary, something shifted, not rage, not revenge, something older, reclamation. Jake saw through the illusion. The HOA wasn't just a neighborhood council, it was a temple of false order. Its leaders weren't protectors, they were high priests of fear, punishing those who dared to color outside their beige lines. So he answered not with compliance, but creation. Enter Trevor, the FX specialist, the alchemist of illusion. Together they brewed a concoction that didn't just coat the pool in slime, it baptized it, transformed it. Neon green, thick as sin, lit from beneath like something summoned from a different world. Every pulse of mist, every bubbling moan triggered by motion sensors. It wasn't decoration, it was ritual, a declaration of chaos in a world obsessed with order, a shrine to rebellion. And when the children arrived, drawn like moths to forbidden magic, Karen's power began to crack. Because here's the secret tyrants never understand. True power doesn't come from fear. It comes from magnetism, from awe, from inspiration. The very thing she tried to suppress, a party vibe, had taken root and bloomed into legend. Slime Pit Oakdale wasn't just trending online, it was rewriting the rules. And Karen, she didn't just lose control of the neighborhood, she lost control of the narrative. Her clipboard couldn't compete with spectacle. Her rules couldn't silence joy. And her authority, drenched, soaked, dissolving in green slime under a summer sun. But this wasn't the end. No, this was the awakening. Because what started as revenge became something sacred. Jake had tapped into something primal, the sacred right to resist, to reclaim your space, to stare down systems built to break you and bend them instead. If you've ever felt that spark in your gut, that whisper that says enough, then comment it below. Write it twice, like a spell. I claim my space, I claim my space. Because from here on out, this isn't just a story, it's initiation. The moment she saw the crowd, Karen faltered. Not because of the slime, not because of the spectacle, but because, for the first time, they were laughing at her. Not obeying, not whispering, laughing. Control had always been her currency. She enforced conformity with the ease of a tyrant who believed herself untouchable. But power, real power, is never about rules. It's about perception, and the crowd no longer saw a leader. They saw a fraud. Her voice shrieked about violations. Her finger jabbed through the air like a dagger made of desperation. But no one moved. No one backed down. And when Jake calmly unfolded his folder, line by line dismantling her authority with citations, permits, environmental certifications, she began to unravel. You see, when tyrants are challenged publicly, they don't just fight, they fracture. Because deep down, beneath the control, is fear. Karen had built her identity on the illusion that she mattered more than others because she enforced the rules. But when Jake exposed her hypocrisy, when he pulled receipts, emails, evidence, she became what all tyrants fear most: accountable. And then the real unraveling began. Neighbors, quiet for years, stepped forward like survivors emerging from a bomb shelter. Their stories poured out: fines for chalk drawings, threats over vegetable gardens, coercion masked as community. One by one, her victims became witnesses. And in that moment, the power she once wielded with surgical cruelty turned on her. Even her own board turned their backs, because Karen's greatest miscalculation was simple. She believed fear was loyalty, but fear only lasts as long as no one stands up. Jake didn't just stand, he built a stage. And on that stage, the queen fell, not by violence, not by vengeance, but by exposure. There was no grand courtroom, just a backyard. No gavel, just green slime bubbling in death. And silence. But that's what made it perfect. Because tyrants don't need thrones to be toppled. They just need the truth to be louder than their lies. This was more than HOA drama. It was ritual collapse. An empire of rules undone by creativity. An idol of control shattered by spectacle. And once the illusion broke, Karen never got it back. 2 weeks later, the woman who ruled Oakdale like a monarch stood in a courtroom, not behind a podium, but behind a defendant's table, not in command, but in chains of consequence. Gone was the perfect hair, the blazer crisp with authority. Karen Peaton looked small, shrinking, fragile in a way tyrants never want to be seen. But this wasn't humiliation, it was reckoning. The judge, stone-faced and unimpressed, read the charges: illegal dumping, property damage, criminal mischief. The courtroom air was sterile, silent. But the weight, crushing, Jake sat quietly in the back row, not smug, not smiling, just watching. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, about what happens when you drag darkness into the light. And the light burns. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage of the balloon dumping, printed screenshots, maintenance receipts for the ruined pool equipment. But more damning were the statements. 5 neighbors testifying not out of vengeance, but exhaustion. Years of quiet suffering, brought forward like ancient bones finally unearthed. Karen tried to spin it. I was just protecting the community. But the judge wasn't fooled. He'd seen this archetype before. The small tyrant who hides behind rules to mask their thirst for dominance. The kind of person who weaponizes structure against the very people it was built to protect. Perhaps you should have considered that, the judge said coldly, before engaging in criminal behavior. The gavel struck. The sentence echoed like thunder. Community service, thousands in fines, a restraining order, and perhaps most devastating of all, public collapse. A career ruined, a reputation shattered. Because for people like Karen, who build their identity on being respected, there is no greater punishment than being dismissed. And yet, this wasn't just the fall of a petty tyrant. This was the system devouring itself. Because when power has no accountability, it always overreaches. And when it overreaches, it eventually implodes. Jake didn't destroy Karen, she did. All he did was shine a mirror in her direction. And in the reflection, the Queen of Oakdale saw what she really was. A scared woman, drunk on control, desperate to matter in a world that had long since moved on. The lesson? Tyranny doesn't die with violence. It dies with truth. And the courage of one man willing to stand in the fire. By the time Karen staggered out of that courtroom, mascara streaked and ego shattered, the neighborhood she once ruled had already moved on. The clipboard was gone. The fines voided. Her name erased from the HOA directory like she was never there. But this story was never really about Karen. It's about you. Because whether you live under an HOA, in a city ruled by bureaucracy, or in a job policed by silent politics, the enemy is always the same. Control disguised as care, compliance sold as peace. These aren't isolated incidents. They're designs, built systems of quiet domination. The same formula shows up again and again. Keep the population docile with paperwork. Label creativity as disruption. Reward silence. Punish fire. Men are told to comply, to shrink, to numb themselves. Don't rock the boat, don't stand out, just pay the fine. But Jake didn't. He chose something older, something dangerous. He became ungovernable. Not by screaming, not by violence, but by transforming shame into spectacle. By answering control not with resistance, but ritual. And that's the key. Because the system doesn't know what to do with joy that doesn't ask permission, with rebellion that glows green under a summer sky, with men who turn slime into sovereignty. You see, they don't fear violence. They fear awakening. They fear you realizing that you were never meant to kneel, that your space is sacred, that your mind is sacred. And once you claim that, truly claim it, there is no rule, no Karen, no clipboard powerful enough to stop you. So this is your moment. Look around your life. Ask yourself, where have I been allowing control to replace freedom? Where have I been too silent, too small, too compliant? And then write it again, right now in the comments. I claim my space, I claim my space. Not just for the algorithm, for you. Because this isn't about HOA, slime wars. This is about memory, about power, about reclaiming the sacred ground beneath your own feet. The kind of story they don't teach you in school, the kind of truth they hope you never hear. But now you've heard it, and you're not the same man anymore. Welcome to the other side.